Evening, Jenny. We're just about to start. I am recording. Don't worry about staying off camera. And we're going to evening. And we're going to start. So tonight's session is about creative writing, all different aspects of creative writing. And there will, as I said, be another presentation, which will be on recording only. And I'll get that up onto your websites towards the end, or maybe the beginning of next week. As you can see, this is what happens. So when are we asked to produce our own original writing in these exams? So that's my question. Okay. When are you asked to produce your own original creative writing? Sorry, what did you say, Leela? Somebody speaking? Come on now. You all must know when you have to do your own original creative writing in the exams.
Yeah, paper 2, question 5.
Question 5 on both papers. That's right. So you need to do your own original creative writing on question 5, paper 1 and paper 2. That's right. People tend to think of it being really creative writing on question 1 because it's a story or a description, but it's just as creative on question 5 on paper 2. So stop share, and to share again, let somebody in. So yes, hello. We've begun, and the trouble is when people come in after I've started, I have to keep unsharing and sharing. So, but we'll pluck on. Nice to see you, Monica. Okay.
Sorry, but I'm late because I didn't get the link Leila sent me.
Ah, I thought I'd sent it out to everybody, but never mind.
No, I haven't got it. So.
Okay, I'll make sure that you're on the list.
Okay.
So yes, you are asked to produce your own original creative writing on question 5. Hello? Who is that? Okay. You're asked to write your own original creative writing on question 5 on paper 1 and paper 2. What is the question based on paper 1? What is question 5 based on? That is, what have you been given in order to inspire your writing?
Language technique.
Nope, nothing to do with language technique.
Structure.
That's just you're just shouting out random things. Think about question 5. Yes. What do you have to write about then? What are you given as the inspiration for you to write about? You're not writing about punctuation, are you?
Oh, description. Is it description?
That may be what you are writing. But what are you writing about? What are you writing your description about?
The story.
Okay, you're just guessing, please. Well, does anybody know question 5? What are you?
Photo. From the photo.
A photograph, yes. You'll have a photograph. Yes. Kelly, is that you remembering? You get a photograph to look at.
Yes, I just misunderstood it. Yeah.
Yeah. And what else do you get on question 5 on paper 1?
You're asked to write the opening of a story, so you're given a choice, Graham. Sorry, Jenny speaking. You're given a choice, so it's either a picture picture, or you're given some text and basically said, can you write about part of a story? But you're told what to write about. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're told. You're not really. It's not. Nothing that you're given on question 5 on paper 1 is very binding, but you are given a choice of inspiration: the photograph and actually a question title. It doesn't have to be. It could be the opening line and then write the continuation, or it could just be telling you write about something on this subject. Yeah. But that's absolutely right. So you've got a choice on question 5 on paper 1. You're given a choice. And how is question 5 on paper 2 different? What do you get on question 5, paper 2?
It's either
you don't have a choice.
That's right. For one thing, you don't get a choice. Monica?
I think it's more something more formal. You know, it's like a letter or persuasive speech or something like that, but I'm not sure.
That's what you're asked to write. Yeah, you're asked to write something which is to a particular format. Yeah. Jenny?
Yeah, I think you're asked to write. Is it a non-fiction text, a piece of non-fiction text?
That's what you're asked to write, but what do they give you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What does the examiner give you for you to write about?
The topic.
The topic.
Not a topic. Yeah. No, not a topic.
Article? Or
nope. No, that again is what you're asked to write about. Okay, it doesn't matter. I'll look at that. Let's look at them now. So paper 1, question 5, you're writing a description or a narrative, and it will be based on a photograph or a picture, or on a title or a task, which will be a written title, a written task. So they'll ask you to write something. So you choose between the written title or task or the photograph. And you will be writing either a description or a narrative. That's what they ask you for on paper 1. On paper 2, you're writing, as you said, a piece of non-fiction in a particular form, but that is based on a quote. Remember, they give you a quote from somebody, quite a long quote. You know, it'll be something like, you know, I love Christmas time. It's the best time of the year. All the children are happy. The holly is decorating the houses, and the Christmas tree stands in the corner. And then that is going to be your inspiration for writing something. Yes, you actually are given a quote, and it's how to deal with that quote that makes the question different. The creative writing questions are worth 50% of your whole exam marks. That's why they're so really, really important. They're both worth 40 marks. Each of your papers is worth 80 marks. That's 160 in total. And of that, 80 marks out of 160 is for question 5. So you can really pick up a bulk of your marks on the exam by doing a good question 5. That's why it's really important you know what you're doing on this question, and you can do it quickly and, you know, fairly efficiently. What are the examiners looking for? Now, do you think they're looking for great plots, lots of action? Are they looking for great characters? Are they looking for original dialogue, lots of conversation? Are they looking for shock endings? Or are they looking for rich, detailed description? I'm thinking here particularly, go on.
Rich, detailed description.
That's what they're looking for. This is on question 1, question 5, paper 1. On paper 1, they are looking for rich, detailed description. But they also want quite a bit of rich, detailed description on paper 2 as well. They are really, really keen on rich, detailed description. So that is bringing out details using your language features, your metaphors, your similes, your onomatopoeia, your alliteration to bring to life the description. That's what they really want to see. You can have some characters, you can have some dialogue, but plots, that is the actual story itself. You know, this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then that happens. Not so much, because you don't have very long to write. You know, maximum really half an hour, and you have to plan as well, and you have to give yourself time to go back and check your work. So actually it boils down to about 15 to 20 minutes of writing. That is really not a long time, and the examiners don't want to see a lot of writing. So it's sticking to that idea of description that will get you maximum marks. Why describe? Well, describing things is an important way to directly involve your reader. The more convincing your description, the more likely you are to draw your readers into your writing. It brings the world of your writing to life, you see. It's important that you make your descriptions as clear as possible, and you can do this by focusing on specific details of the person or the place or the event that you are describing. Another reason to describe, to use language to create pictures in the mind, is that it is it's the most interesting and the most important skill that we use in descriptive writing, in creative writing. It's the skill of the poet or the novelist or the short story writer. It shows language being used at its highest level. It's the opposite to formal argument. It is taking your readers on a journey and actually making pictures appear in their heads. Just a couple of examples to look at, writers using creative writing in different ways to describe things. So this is a description of a place, a scene, if you like. So you have, this is where the action is happening. The sun was still red and large, the sky above cloudless, and light blue glaze poured over baking clay. But close over the ground a dirty grey haze hovered. As they followed the lane towards the sea, they came to a place where, yesterday, a fair-sized spring had bubbled up by the roadside, but now was dry. Even as they passed, some water splashed out, and then it was dry again, although gurgling inwardly to itself. But the group of children were hot, far too hot to speak to one another. They sat on their ponies as loosely as possible, longing for the sea. Now, I said this is a description of a place, a description of a scene. There are people, the group of children. Is there action here? Is there something happening in this piece of description, this first paragraph? Anybody?
No, actually, it just describing this.
Yeah, but you were right. It mainly describes the scene. However, the second sentence does say, as they followed the lane towards the sea, they came to a place. So this is the people, the children, moving through the scene. There is movement. At the end, the group of children were hot, too hot to speak. They sat on their ponies. So this is the children doing something. So there is a very small amount of action. Movement through the scene and the children feeling hot and sitting on their ponies, feeling dry and hot. But the majority of the writing and the effect of the writing is all about scene setting. It's about giving the reader an idea of what it was like there, of what it looked like. Anything other than what it looked like. So we have sight. You know, we have colors like the big red sun, the blue glaze of the sky, and so on. Do we have any other senses being described here?
They sat on their ponies.
Well, that's action. That's what the characters are doing. They sat on their ponies. Yes.
It was dry. It's like a
dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Feeling,
dryness. Yeah. A feeling. Yeah, exactly. A physical feeling. A physical feeling. And the children, as they sit on their ponies, they feel far too hot. Yes.
It's feel as well.
Yeah, which is repeated. They were hot, far too hot. And as we know from looking at language features, repeating the same word, it just increases it. It emphasizes how hot it was. So feelings, physical feelings, dryness, heat, absolutely. So you have sight, you have feeling, physical feeling, touch.
A splash out, hearing, water splash out.
Splashed. What sense is that appealing to? The word splashed.
Hearing.
Hearing, that's right. So it's that special word, onomatopoeia. Yeah. So as they pass, some water splashed out, so you can hear it coming out, and then the contrast. Then it was dry again. So it uses lots of language features to create this impression of the place. It doesn't just say there was a kind of a dry desert and there were some brooks that had been dried up and there was no water around and it was hot. It doesn't say that because it would be boring. Yeah, this is trying to take the reader and actually make you feel like you're really there. It starts with the sky and then it moves through all the different feelings and things you can see and hear and the dryness and the heat, and it gives you a physical feeling of being there like the children are, putting you in their position, which is a much cleverer and more interesting way to describe the scene. You can even imagine. Sorry, go ahead.
Is it gurgling inwardly as well as onomatopoeia?
Yes.
Gurgling.
Indeed. Yep. So you have quite a bit of onomatopoeia because you've got gurgling.
We have 3 words here.
Yeah, gurgling.
Like gargling, like splashing, of course, bubbled.
Yes, and bubbled. Yeah. So it's actually quite noisy, isn't it? Bubbled, splashed, gurgling. And of course, that brings to life the idea of water. And it's water that is more or less absent. It's a very dry place, a very dry scene. And the children are really thirsty and hot. And yet it keeps tormenting them with the water that isn't there. You know, yesterday it bubbled. And even as they're passing it, it splashes out and goes away again. And they can hear it gurgling somewhere, but it's not there. And it sets up that feeling of the absence of water, even as it makes you feel you can hear the water. Very clever piece of writing. Yeah. And you can imagine that, you know, obviously Richard Hughes didn't do this, but imagine a photograph of a deserty place, very dry looking, a photograph, and that he wrote this to bring that to life for the readers. Maybe there were some children sitting on ponies to one side of the picture. That could be part of a response to that photograph. Obviously, that's not what he did because he wasn't doing a GCSE exam, but it would have been a very effective way of doing it. Let's move on to a different example. So that was about place. Here we have another place. This time we have actually got a photograph. Imagine this mud hut, drying, baked out in the wilds, you know, well away from the towns and the cities, near the African desert of the Kalahari. Suddenly she saw the house. tucked away behind the trees, almost in the shadow of the hill. It was a bare earth house in the traditional style. Brown mud walls, a few glassless windows, with a knee-height wall around the yard. A previous owner a long time ago had painted designs on the wall, but neglect and the years had scaled them off, and only their ghosts remained. She opened the door and eased herself out of the van. The sun was riding high. Its light prickled at her skin. They were too far west here, too close to the Kalahari Desert, and her unease increased. This was not the comforting land she had grown up with. This was the merciless Africa, the waterless land. So here, the pitch, it's a similar kind of writing, isn't it? Because it creates an impression of a place. It's about the location, specifically the house, but also the area around the house. But this time, how does the writer present this image? How does he make it live for us? There's something he does particularly differently here to the first piece we looked at.
Is it use of adjective and adverbs?
Certainly does use adjectives. Yes, it was a bare earth house. Yes.
It introduced a little bit history of the house, so it's like you know, stepping into the past.
Yes. The first piece we looked at was very much about nature. It was about a natural scene. You know, the sky, the desert, the gurgling water underneath the ground. The children were going through it as if almost like they were alien visitors. Here, everything is about human beings to a certain extent. All the way through, we are seeing things through the protagonist's eyes. Protagonist means just the character who's the central character. So the detective lady in this book, the number one ladies detective agency, she has gone to this place. She's trying to solve a mystery, and she goes out and to this particular location. It's all about what she's seeing and what she's feeling. So it goes through the eyes of one of the characters, and so that immediately puts the reader inside the character who is experiencing everything. She saw the house. She opened the door. Yes, its light prickled at her skin. It isn't just a few people on the side of the picture. This time, everything's through the medium of a particular character. And you can use a character to create a description. You can either describe the character and what they're doing, or you can talk as if you were the character, or as if you were observing the character, and tell us what that person is seeing and doing and feeling and hearing and smelling and tasting and touching. So here we see what she sees. The house tucked away behind the trees, almost in the shadow of the hill. Yes, the bare earth house in the traditional style. So as you were saying, there's a history. This is not just a house, it's in a traditional style. It connects to the history of the place. We hear about the previous owner a long time ago. So the person who built and looked after the house is long gone. It's deserted. And we also have a way of describing this, and you said about adjectives and so, but in a way, it's just words. Look at some of the words and how they make you feel. Look at the word bear. You know, look at the word ghosts. Prickled.
Yeah.
Unease.
Isn't it to the desert?
Yes. So sorry again. Say again. Sorry.
This word connotated to the desert or could we say semantic field of this?
Yes, right. It's a semantic field. Very good. I would call it also word choice, but you can use either of those. But it is very much about that. The idea of word choice, semantic field. This creates an impression in the reader's mind, almost without them not noticing. You know, almost it just slips into the mind of the reader that there's something a bit uncomfortable, you know, dangerous, strange about this particular area. I'm going to pop outside now and just unshare and bring Bestoon in. Oh, he was there a second ago. I'm sure he was. Oh, you got in, Bestoon. Hello. Sorry.
Hello, hi.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so we're just looking at this this description of the hut. You can see that the use of the word ghosts here isn't actually talking about real ghosts, but just it's talking about the very faint outline images of pictures that used to be on the walls. But the writer didn't use the word ghosts by accident any more than he used the word bear or talked about unease. These words have power, as you know from studying language and the way language works. They have connotations and connections. So introducing the word ghosts, he's not saying that the hut is haunted, but suddenly the reader has the idea of ghosts in their mind. And it's such a powerful idea, this idea of ghosts, that you can see why she's a little bit scared about getting out, a little bit scared of going into the house. It's irrational, but it's the way we work as people. As soon as somebody mentions ghosts, we start thinking about ghosts. And without it's how to create a haunted atmosphere without actually saying it's a haunted house. So it's a clever use of semantic field, just dropping a word in which has an effect, even though that word's not really being used in the same way that we would normally expect. Lots of little details being picked up on. The color, the brown mud walls. And again, mud walls, what other color is it going to be than brown? But using the word brown and mud together brings it sort of, wow, you know, in the same sentence you get the word earth and brown and mud. It's really emphasizing just how rough and ready and primitive this piece of building is, and how close to the earth it is, how close to the soil it is. Just draw your attention to the word glassless windows. What do you make of that? A few glassless windows.
No airy, dark. Again, scary.
Yeah. Do you know what figure of speech, what language feature is being used here? Glassless windows.
Oh yes, it's
You don't get them very often, and when you do, it's worth pointing them out. We normally associate windows with glass.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So the idea of a glassless window is apparently a contradiction. And apparent contradictions used as a feature like this is called onomatopoeia. It's called oxymoron. Yeah.
Okay, oxymoron.
Yeah, it's called oxymoron. Yes. Now, in this case, the window is just a hole in the wall, which of course is what windows were for thousands of years before we started putting glass in them. First of all, it sort of emphasizes the primitive nature of it, but also the fact that in this really hot desert place, you want as much air coming through as you possibly can. You do not want to keep the air out. So putting glass in the window, even if you had any, would keep the air out. It would make it hotter. But it does also maybe suggest to certainly to a Western reader that but this is a poor place. They can't afford glass in the windows, maybe. And just the strangeness of it, using using this method, glassless windows, with its contradiction, sets up a more of a mysterious atmosphere as well. So this one, still talking about place, but this time the place as seen and interpreted by a character within the story, and also using semantic field or word choice in order to bring to life a feeling in the reader that something might not be right here. You know, just those words which are negative and are a little bit, they're dangerous, merciless, unease, prickled, neglect, and so on. They build up to give you an impression that something's not quite right. And this one, the last one I'm going to look at, very different piece of writing, this, as you can already see. They are covered with a thick coating of spikes, but these are white and soft, as though made of rubber. They gradually harden and turn brown when the babies are a few weeks old. When they are old enough to leave the nursery, the mother leads them out and shows them how to hunt for food. They walk in line, the tail of one held in the mouth of the baby behind. The baby at the head of the column holds tight to mother's tail with grim determination, and they move through the twilit hedgerows like a strange, prickly centipede. What type of writing is this? And why is it different?
Do you mean
Sorry, go on.
Third party, Graham. So he's looking at it from a third party perspective.
It is in third person. Yeah, it is in third person.
Sorry. I keep saying third party.
It's like person. Story, I think.
It is written in third person, but so were the other two.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of story.
You think it's a story?
Maybe.
Anybody see anything different? What makes you think it's a story?
You know, when we read, it sounds like a book for children about hedgehogs.
So a book about children for hedgehogs, does that have to be a story?
Okay.
The description?
Well, yeah, it definitely does describe. Yeah. But this piece of writing is not fiction.
Okay.
Like you said, it's about hedgehogs. It's trying to teach the reader about hedgehogs.
Okay.
So that makes it non-fiction. So if he's writing about what hedgehogs and hedgehog babies are like, and how they learn to leave their nest and go out with their mothers, and so on, that is actually non-fiction. And yet, you're perfectly right to say that it is like a story because of the way that it's written and described. There's no reason why fiction and non-fiction have to differ in the way they're written. And this idea that non-fiction has to be terribly formal and really sort of rather, well, let's say it, dull, is absolutely not true. Some really great books and great works of non-fiction have brought to life ideas and feelings and scenes just as brilliantly as any work of fiction like a novel or a story. There is absolutely no reason why your question 5 on paper 2 should be written in a dry, matter-of-fact way. In fact, you will lose marks if you write in a dry, matter-of-fact way. You need to still be using rich description. You still need to talk about you still need to be bringing it to life for the reader and making it interesting. Here, Gerald Durrell does that in a couple of different ways. He's trying to bring to life the idea of the young hedgehogs, but he's not writing it as if it was a biology textbook. But he does give you information. They are covered with a thick coating of spikes, but these are white and soft, as though made of rubber. Well, there's a factual statement. We now know that the spikes of the baby hedgehogs, not like their parents, are still springy like rubber. That they spring back, and you can actually almost get the sense of what it would feel like if you were stroking them or putting your fingers through their spikes. The words soft and rubber give you that feeling of it would be really quite pleasurable to stroke a baby hedgehog, not like the hard, or painful thing of stroking an adult hedgehog. So the word spikes, which by itself is a harsh, jagged word that almost is about pain, is then softened by the use of the word soft and rubber. Look at these words, though. He doesn't say that they're old enough to leave the nest. They're old enough to leave the nursery. He doesn't say the adult hedgehog. He says the mother. He doesn't talk about the young hedgehog, or whatever the actual word for a young hedgehog is. I've forgotten. He talks about baby. So it's a baby in a nursery with its mother. So what is the writer doing? Go on.
Is he humanizing? He's humanizing them.
Totally humanizing them. Yeah. And the word you were talking about, personification. You're right. That's the word for it. Personify. He's personifying them. He's making them like human babies and human mothers. And to use the word nursery, yes, it is exactly the place where the mother nurses the babies. She will feed them with her milk. And that's what nursing means in that context. But we have nurseries, we'll do up a room in the house with all the mobiles and the toys and the nice wallpaper for our babies to sleep in. That's the nursery. Or the nurseries where we leave our kids when we go to work or something. It feels like a very human word, nursery. So to give the word nursery to where which will be a hole in a tree or something, covered in leaves, or in this case a box. It's a very grand word to use for that, but it makes these animals more understandable to a reader, particularly a young reader, because it makes them like us, which is a very particular use of language. And you're right, that's personification, but it's a long personification. It's not being used just for a quick image. It's actually being used as a way for the reader to get into the description and understand these animals, which are actually rather strange little animals. But as soon as we know that they go off walking line in line, holding tails, and trudging along with their mothers, it makes them much more open to our appreciation as being. Yeah, they're just like babies going for a walk in the park, aren't they? Yeah. Holding hands, keeping their eyes on mum, and it makes it more interesting and fun to read for younger people. And it also, but at the same time, it gets across the information about what they do and how they get used to going out of the nest and so on.
I think the reason why I chose the word humanizing is it because as I was reading it, I think is Gerald Durrell, is he trying to? So when you read that, you will almost imagine that hedgehog, and then you're like you said, it's kind of a prickly creature that we know, and so we're not going to feel the same about it as maybe we would say a cat or a dog. But if he talks about it in this way, we can almost feel like it's like almost like a little fluffy, almost like we would like it just as much as we would a cat or a dog. So so that's why I think I use the word humanizing it, because I thought he's humanizing it. So to me anyway, it made me feel, oh, you know, I'd want to go and touch it and feel it, and it sounds lovely and fluffy almost.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. Really well explained. If you were doing it for your language question, that's where you could go to town on that, because it is right. They alienate us a little bit from them because they're so spiky and they creep around in the hedges and they only come out after dark usually. But actually this makes them into happy little creatures that we can see have relationships. Now, whether they have relationships with their mothers the same as we have, is you know, in a way, it's the sort of thing that a lot of naturalists, you know, and people who write seriously about animals really don't like. They would go, "Oh, don't humanize animals because they're not humans. They are very different." But actually, it's a way of getting us into the idea that these are animals with just as much going on for them as are the more cuddly animals, which I think is exactly what you're right. Monica, did you want to ask a question or say
Yeah,
something?
it's exactly why I told you that I perceive this as a story, because it's story like narrative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's non-fiction, we can know that. But if we read this, it's not obvious that it's not non-fiction, because we don't know. But the style, it's like extract from the book. So.
And that's exactly my point. And so thank you for saying that. Yes, at the end of the day, if I gave you a paragraph from a great novel describing a scene, and I gave you a paragraph from a great work of travel writing, for example, or a diary of somebody who's gone to interesting places, although one of them would be non-fiction and would be on paper 2, and the other one would be fiction and would be on paper 1, you wouldn't be able to tell necessarily which was which. You know, great descriptive writing is just great descriptive writing. But something seems to happen to our learners that when they get on to question 5 on paper 2, they start writing in a very matter-of-fact, rather dull way, not using language creatively, not being exciting with their descriptions, because they think, oh, this is non-fiction, and so I've got to be very matter-of-fact. And it's absolutely not the case. The greatest writing in non-fiction is just as creative as the greatest writing in fiction. And you said it very well. Thank you.
Okay.
So what can be described? As we've seen from this, what can you describe in a piece of writing? What elements of a story or a narrative can be open for description?
I think we can describe everything. Which
absolutely. Everything, but just give me a few of everything.
Everything. Yeah. You can describe place, person, places, character, behavior, everything. Character.
That's pretty much
nature,
nature.
animals.
Yeah. So things about nature, things about place, things about people, character. I mean, it's sort of like nature, but it's also the elements, you know, like the weather and so on. Yeah, and that's basically what you said. Everything. Yeah. Feelings, internal feelings, like the lady when she was feeling unease, emotions, thoughts. So yes, I mean these are the main ones, but basically everything to do with what you're telling the story about, or you're writing a description or a non-fiction piece about, can be. We have to use description. It's the only way we can put across things to the reader. The choice is between telling things and showing things. So we can use description to bring things to life so that people experience them when they read them, and they understand them because they're kind of experiencing them. Or we can just tell them things. You know, you can just say it was a dry place, or you can bring it to life with language so that I understand that it's a dry place. And that's a very different experience of reading. It's much more interesting, it's much more effective. And you're also using your language more creatively. Yeah. So don't forget the internal feelings of the character. So you can create a character and have them experiencing feelings, emotions, and thoughts. Jenny? Jenny, you had a hand up.
Thank you. Yes, Graham, I just wanted to ask a question around that. So when we're describing on question 5,
Yeah.
So my question is there a cut-off point in terms of, I know we've only got about, like you said, about 20 minutes to write, but if we're describing, is there a cut-off point in terms of how lengthy we go into a description of a particular thing? So say, for example, if I was going to, so it's a picture of the mud hut, for example, that we just saw, and if I went into did a whole paragraph, for example, just on the mud hut, would that be too much?
Yes, it probably would.
Right.
And I think one of the key differences between paper 1 and paper 2 is paper 1 can be entirely description. You can basically just write description for the whole thing. Paper 2, you do have to kind of address the topic that you're talking about, and it's more about dropping description into it. So say you were doing a question about winter weather is very dangerous. It can cause panic in the streets. It can cause car accidents and so on. But what you can do in your answer is bring to life wintry weather. One of the paragraphs that you write could be, what does it feel like to be in the middle of a blizzard? What does it feel like to experience extreme cold? And you could make that very, very startlingly effective with description. But yes, you have to do more in question 5 than just describe. But you should do description in it. A lot of people just do facts rather than description, and you do need to bring your facts to life a little bit.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's terrific. So it is very important, I think, to make a plan. People get a bit upset about plans. I remember when I was at school, they just really started talking about planning your writing. And so we used to go, well, we'd write a story, and then at the end, I'd put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I would look at my story and I'd write the bits from each of the paragraphs on the plan to show that I'd done a plan. Well, of course, that was completely the wrong way around. You need to think in advance what you're going to write. It isn't just a dry exercise that, in giving the examiners what they feel they like, and you think, well, I could just write off the top of my head. Yes, you can. There are even some people who can do that incredibly well, and you'd never know they didn't think about it before they started writing. If you are one of those people, fine. If you're one of those people and you can just sit down and write for half an hour and bang, it's brilliant, well, good luck, you're going to do well. Everybody else has to kind of think, what if I go in there and I haven't got a clue what to write? I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to say. Well, writing a plan can help you do it. So there are lots of reasons for writing a plan. One is definitely the examiners think it's important. They're not going to give you marks for your plan. They think it's important because it makes your work better. And they like structure. There's even that question 3 on paper 1, which is all about structure. Well, structure comes from planning. Pieces of writing don't have structure unless they've been planned. So they want you to have structure in your writing. It stops you from just wandering off and going round in circles and it might be very nice to read, but it isn't getting me anywhere. Having a plan is like having a map. It gets you from A to B. It helps you to keep your word count down. Words are time. And on question 5, it's a long piece of time and people just write and write and write pages and pages and pages, and then they run out of time and they haven't got an ending and it didn't really go anywhere, and they think because they've written 8 pages it's good. Actually, the important thing is for it to do what you intend it to do and for it to have structure. So we ask you to write less and get control of it, and making a plan is about controlling your writing. It also helps you to think in paragraphs, because if you think in steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll then think about what's going to go in each paragraph as you go along. And I would add another one. I think a plan can actually help you to write even if you haven't got inspiration, even if you're thinking on this particular morning in May or whatever in June, I have no inspiration for writing anything. I'm looking at that picture and I don't think anything. Well, a plan can give you ideas. One of the key things about writing descriptively, and indeed planning to write descriptively, is to use the senses, as we've seen. So it's, what does the person or the place that you're describing look like? That's the visual. I think that's obvious, but it's also, what sounds do I hear? This could be the person's voice, or it could be movements, or it could be the sounds of nature around you, the sound of the sea. What does it feel like to be there? You know, a character puts their hand out and touches a tree, or, you know, maybe there's damp seeping through their shoes, or the wind on your face. These are feelings, physical feelings. What does it taste like? Now, maybe less obviously, sometimes we exclude taste, but you imagine that it's a hot day and you're running. Well, you're going to get salty sweat on your lips. You taste the salt on your lips. So sometimes taste does come into it. A lovely dinner or a lovely breakfast, you know, the taste that comes on. But probably the most evocative of all is smell. There are certain smells that if you just say that you can smell something, that brings the entire scene to life. How do you, just think about describing a walk down a hospital corridor and what it smells like. You are immediately, if you've ever been in a hospital, or if you've ever been in a schoolroom, you'll know exactly what we mean by the smell of those places. So think about senses and how you're going to get those into your piece of writing. So I have a couple of different plans that I would use, and say that you can use these plans for any piece of writing on paper one, where you are writing and should be thinking about writing pure description. Okay, I'm still banging on about that. The examiners want as much as possible for you to write description. They do say you can write narrative, but as you can see, as you'll see in a bit, even if you're writing story, it's still description. It's that sort of, they don't want, John got up and then he went downstairs and then he went to the door and then he walked down the street. That's not what they want. They want description. So I've got, first of all, the senses plan. So you know that it would be useful to use your senses to make a description. So the plan for that, I would say, and this doesn't come from me, this comes from the examiners. We went to conferences with examiners and they said, look, we don't want 8 pages of random writing. 4, possibly 5 paragraphs maximum. And make those paragraphs really join together. Make them obvious why they are paragraphs, and really go deep into the description. So paragraph 1, what do you see? Paragraph 2, what do you hear? Paragraph 3, what do you smell or taste or touch, whichever one you want? And paragraph 4, how do you feel? So more the emotional thinking part. And each of these are paragraphs separate. So do the visual and then do the audio. And then maybe talk about the smells of the place. And finally, what does the person experiencing all this feel? When I say you, it doesn't have to be you. It could be a character. It could be the old man sitting on the bench looking out at the sea. What does he actually see there? Describe it visually. What does he hear? The roaring of the tide, the crashing of the waves. And just do a paragraph of description of sounds. And then he smells all those sea smells, the rotting seaweed, the hot dog stand, the whatever. And finally, how does it make him feel, this sense of contentment, washing back to his childhood when he was a little boy on holidays with his parents? And you have a little story of a man in the old age contemplating the sea and contemplating his life, but it's all done through description of place and description of feelings. And that's enough. It doesn't have to be a story or narrative with events, with things happening, with lots of plot, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, as we traditionally always said. You simply probably don't have time to write that sort of story. And if you did, it would be very thin because you wouldn't have time to develop the plot. The plots need time to develop and to roll out, whereas you can immediately put us in a place and describe the place. You can immediately put us inside somebody's head and describe what is happening around them. And that's why you're given a photograph, just to give you an idea. But you can actually do the census plan for any title they give you. You really can. So I imagined a title, a typical thing, this has come up several times. Write a description of a place that was special to you in your childhood. Yeah, it's a nice one. You simply have to remember a place from childhood and start describing it. Remember, it doesn't have to be real. This is not a test of whether or not you've really written about somewhere you know about from childhood. You know, it can be anything, anywhere, anytime. Creative writing, fictional writing fiction is almost a definition of lying. You know, basically just make something up. But if you have got somewhere you can think of straight away, that will help you. So I came up with this just to show you the census plan in action. So it's autumn at Grandma's house. This is my place from childhood, Grandma's house. Okay. You don't need to put a title, by the way. Just start writing. The leaves were turning golden brown. The grass was overlong and stubby and beginning to yellow. The path up to Grandma's door was shiny with the rain. Inside the porch, there was a litter of newspapers and magazines in piles like toy castles. There were boxes of bits and pieces that were bigger than me. Now, this paragraph is about what I can see in my memory going up to Grandma's house. So it's the visual one. And so it's about colors, golden brown, beginning to yellow. It's about experiences of light, shiny with the rain, you know, the reflections of light. And what you can see around you, the litters of newspapers and magazines, the boxes of bits and pieces. So it's all visual. And do you see also that in terms of telling a narrative, it takes you from outside the house, in the garden, the leaves were turning golden brown, through to the beginning of going into the house. Now we're inside the porch. And it starts to give you an idea of what the place is like. It's a bit chaotic, all these bits and pieces, magazines piled up, but they're fun and they're kind of exciting for a child because they're like toy castles. And toy castles appeal to little boys and girls, I suppose. And you imagine the turrets and the towers of newspapers, you know, almost bigger than the child. There's a lot of description going on in a very short paragraph. And it's all description, but at the same time, it's moving the narrative along. Second paragraph. In the hallway, the great-grandfather clock was ticking and ticking, and the ticking was echoing off the bookcases and the walls. From the kitchen at the end of the hall came the chinking of glasses and the rattling of cutlery, a soft, crackling voice humming some old, half-remembered tune. So we're now inside the house. But what senses are we getting this time in this paragraph?
Sounds.
Sounds, that's right. And so I bring, the clock, and it's related to grandparents by being a grandfather clock. It's ticking and ticking, just repeating the word ticking. There's no.
What you hear,
It's what you hear, isn't it? Yeah.
What you
And
hear.
it's onomatopoeia. It's what you're hearing. It's very simple. I just use the word ticking 3 times. Ticking and ticking, and the ticking was echoing. And so, although it's very simple language, it's very effective in just bringing to life that old person's hallway with the clock ticking away,
Repetition of ticking.
Repetition of ticking, yes. So it's a repetition of onomatopoeia, because ticking is the onomatopoeia, but repetition makes it more effective. Echoing, again, you can just, it emphasizes it. And it's bouncing off the bookcases and the walls. So I'm giving you more information about what the place is like as you go down that hallway. But at the end of the hallway, from the kitchen, and so we're not inside the kitchen, we're just hearing the sounds coming out of the kitchen. Chinking of glasses, rattling of cutlery. What am I doing now? Chinking of glasses, rattling of cutlery.
Sound.
Sound again.
Onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia. Kitchen noises. Yeah. Again, very simple, but very effective. And then the human being inside that room, the grandmother, is introduced just from the sound of her humming. A soft, crackling voice humming. Crackling because she's elderly. Soft because she's a grandmother. Humming itself is onomatopoeia. So again, it's just the music is introduced of grandma humming. And I've put in old half-remembered tune just to give it a little bit of pathos, a little bit of she's thinking of the old times through her tune. It's just a touch to give the reader more of a picture of her as a personality. But most of the description there is sound. So again, remember, paragraphs are meant to be focused on one thing, aren't they? Yeah. Somebody's got quite a bit of noise in the background. If you wouldn't mind muting, that'd be. If you've got, that's it. Thanks. So paragraphs are meant to be about one thing or have one focus, and in this case, the focus comes from the plan. Paragraph 1 is focused on sight. Paragraph 2 is focused on hearing. Paragraph 3 is focused on smells. Places are particularly resonant with smells, and so we have the smells from the kitchen came sweeping through. And now I'm just going to list, because I've got a semicolon, I've got a colon there, so it's now going to be a list. Golden smells of pastry and fruits browning in the oven. And under those, the bolder statements of meat, a roasting joint. I mean, that makes me hungry. Even I didn't have tea, but it makes me hungry. But I haven't actually described what those smells are like. How do you describe smells? I've linked the idea of pastry to gold, to fruits browning, and as they turn to sugar, and the sugar starts to bubble. And the idea of meat, just meat, a roasting joint of meat. Sorry if you're vegetarian. It just is the richest and the most beautiful smell, especially when you're hungry. Inside the kitchen, a flowery scent adds to the mixture. So flowery scent. Now this word scent, because I started talking about smell. Everything smells, but scent is always a beautiful smell. So scent is a beautiful smell. It's another word for perfume, scent. So here I'm talking about the smell of flowers, the sort of scents that you get in certain types of perfume. A smell that I love, grandma's perfume. So again, I bring it back to grandma. Just like I did in the one before, her singing and humming, and now at the end of this one, what she smells like. That perfume, you know, the way a person smells. And it isn't just the perfume they wear, it's the way it fuses with their own personal smell, their own personal scent. There are certain people that you will only remember most powerfully through their scent, through what they smelled like. So one of the things, go on.
She uses a flowery scent, isn't it? Maybe all the time
Yeah,
she used down here.
That's right. Yeah. So it's the old-fashioned flowery scent. None of your bold sort of go out and get 'em girl kind of perfumes. It's more of a grandma perfume. Yeah. And that actually connects her to nature. It connects her to the garden images that we had at the very beginning. And all of that adds to cohesion. It adds to structure. You know, that things keep going back to the same way. That the actual talking about grandma in each of the paragraphs, bringing things together, making it a sentimental journey in my memory. Because it isn't just, this is grandma's house. It's actually my memories of grandma's house. And that is through time, through emotion. And you see that in that last line, a smell that I love, grandma's perfume. And that's surely not just because I love the smell, but because I love grandma. And then the last one is about my feelings as a boy, as a little boy, and remembering my feelings. I am safe. I am where I am loved. I feel wrapped up in a favorite blanket, in a favorite bed, in a favorite room. Nothing can ever hurt me here. Nothing can scare me. Nothing can ever be wrong. I am home. So this last bit is about emotion.
Feeling.
It's about the feelings of safety and warmth and comfort. And just remembering that feeling of those times when I was a little boy and running up the path to grandma's door. Yes, you have pure description just of things and the place itself and what it smelt like and what it looked like and what you could hear, but ultimately it's also how it makes you feel. And it takes the reader on a journey from the outside of the house right through up the hallway into the kitchen and right into the presence of grandma herself. And then the man remembering the boy and how the boy felt and why this memory is so important. And so it becomes almost poetic, just a capturing the idea that was tipped off by the subject of the question. You know, write about a place that was important to you as a child. One, two, three, four little paragraphs. Carefully thought about, carefully planned. That's all you need to write. Not page after page after page. Carefully turned out paragraphs. They look longer when you write them by hand, of course. Just going to sorry about that. I dropped out again. So Lucia, hopefully he's coming in. I mean, hopefully you get an idea of what I was trying to do there. You trying to fulfill what the question is asking, but at the same time, be as creative as you can. Sumaya, you got a question?
Yes, please. I want to ask you one question. That's you know, that's this Autumn House. That description about the Autumn House. My question is that's we in exam we write 4 to 5 paragraph, and does the paragraph have to be longer than this paragraph of description of Autumn House?
No. I mean, but I'm saying that once you start to handwrite those, you'll see that they are reasonably chunky. You can write more or less. You know,
less that I don't have enough marks. Even less that I don't think that I have.
But the mark scheme here is this, and the mark scheme isn't about how many words. It isn't about length. It's about quality, and they really are more interested in quality than quantity. Their most common criticism of students' work is that you write and write and write, and there is no shape, there is no planning, there is no cohesion, there is no sense that you know the direction it's going in, and maybe not even having an ending because you ran out of time. You know, planning means that you're always going to make sure that you come to a point, that you come to a way of closing it, which doesn't need to be particularly neat. It just needs to be a feeling of closure. And doing that, maybe I've exaggerated a little bit, but doing that is more important than writing lots. They go by the quality of it, the fact that it's full of language features, the fact that it's full of description, full of imagery, full of emotion. That's what they will go with. That's what they will mark.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to share back in again. Now, remember that was write a description of a place. But sometimes it will be, what if the question was write a story or narrative about a place that was special to you in your childhood? It's a different way of doing the same question. Write a story. Well, you immediately think, well, now I've got to have a characters, I've got to have something happening, I've got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, because they said story. And they do this to you because they say, write a story about transport, write a story about an adventure. And you think, now I'm writing a traditional, once upon a time there was a man and he did this and he did that and he then went there. And actually now you're back into writing a plot. But if you think about story, even if that's the word used, it's getting very noisy somewhere. Very noisy somewhere. If you write a story, if you think about the word story as narrative, sometimes they'll use this word narrative. Narrative simply means a person or people are doing something. Okay, I'm going to have to ask you again. There's shouting in the background, lots of noises. Could you please switch off your mic? Okay, thank you. So if you think about it as a narrative, which is telling a story, but actually it's just about people doing or experiencing something. That's what a narrative is. It tells you about a person or people experiencing something. And that can be very, very slight, very passive. So how differently would I have written it if it was write a story about a place that was special to me in childhood? Well, here we go. I ran into the garden where the leaves were turning golden brown. The grass was overlong and stubby and beginning to yellow. I ran up the path to Grandma's door. It was shiny with the rain and so on. Okay, I'm having to compete with the talking and the kids in the background. Whoever it is, you must know who you are. Can you please switch off your mic? So you can see, well, how different is it really? Now it's about me. I've made it about a person. It's I did this, I did that. I could hear this, I could hear that. But it kind of was before as well. Yeah. There isn't really a difference between description and narrative. As long as a person is present, it's narrative. It's a story. It's a story about what I felt like when I went to my grandma's house. It's still 4 paragraphs. It's still very slight. It still doesn't have huge amounts of writing. There is no plot. The plot is I'm running from the garden and I end up in grandma's kitchen with grandma. That's it. That's the story. How much story can you possibly write in 4 paragraphs? You don't need lots and lots of plot. In fact, you don't need any plot at all. And this comes directly from the examiners. They, regardless of what that question is, write description. Have you got it? That comes from the examiners. It's not just me. I'm not making it up. They're the people who mark them, and that's what they want you to write. They want you to show how well you can write descriptively. And so any amount of plot and, the old man walked across the room, he opened the door, there was a man there, the man came in, he sat down. They don't want that. There's no description. There may be plenty of things happening, but it's not descriptive writing. They would rather have said, write descriptively. But for some reason, they weren't allowed to because of the way the government have framed the syllabus. But that is what they're looking for. Write description. You can turn a description into a little scene from a story, but don't try and write, a great adventure or a trip to the seaside or anything like that, or what I did on my holidays. Don't write that. Write description. There you go. That's what it says there. Narrative or description, just write description. So you're given a photograph as well as a line, a title. The photograph is often easier. They give it to you so that you've got something to write about. It often isn't obvious what the picture is. Don't worry about it. In fact, some of them are pretty, what's going on here then? Well, that's the whole point. It's meant to be a spur to your imagination. And so my other instant plan is using the photo. Because let's say there's probably always going to be 4 things that stand out most in a picture. So what would you say stands out most in this picture? What are the 4 main things about this picture?
His sight.
What could he see? Yeah. Yeah. What's he looking at? What's he looking at? Yeah. Any other features in the picture?
What is feeling as well?
Yeah, what's going on in his head? Yeah, what's he thinking, feeling? Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Think what you can see in the picture. What stands out immediately?
The man is touching the window.
Yeah.
Probably it's cold and outside is the rain.
So you've got that hand on the window. So you've got touch. Yeah. Anything else?
And it's a city outside, I think.
Yeah, whatever you think that is.
Yeah. Maybe he's in the train, but I'm not sure.
It could be a train, or it could be a window in a house. It could be anything really.
Yeah.
That could be
rainy.
Yeah, you've definitely got the rain on the window, which is lovely, isn't it? And you can just describe the effect of the rain on the window, the raindrops, and what he's looking through the raindrops. One thing that my eye was always drawn to the ring. Yeah, it's a little tiny detail, but the ring on his finger is quite interesting because you can talk about the hand on the window and then focus in on the ring. And you might have done that idea of going from focusing on something and then zooming into a little detail to write about. And what the ring might represent, because it's on his wedding finger, so it could represent his wife, his marriage, and so on. You can imagine he doesn't look that happy, does he? And so on. So basically, that could give me some ideas to start with. If you find 4, that gives you 4 paragraphs. See? You can actually write on the exam paper. You're allowed to scribble on the exam paper. So that immediately becomes, a plan. I've got the expression on his face. I've got the hand on the cold window, the wedding ring, and I've got the other trains passing by or what's going past in the distance outside the window. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That is 4 paragraphs. That's my plan. It's as fast as that. It's the most obvious things in the picture, and I'm simply going to write about those things. So I didn't have any kind of feeling or thought about it. It's just automatically choose the 4 most obvious things about the picture and write 4 paragraphs, 1 on each. And I think everybody can do that regardless of, because you can just sort of put yourself on automatic pilot doing that. So paragraph 1 is going to be his cold hand on the window. Paragraph 2, focus on the wedding ring. Paragraph 3, the expression on his face, the emotion behind it. And paragraph 4, the buildings and the windows rushing by. Maybe he's leaving his old life behind. He's going off to the future, an uncertain future, and so on. Mm-hmm. Now, within this, you can use the senses as well. You can combine them, because the idea of the hand, the cold touch of the glass, the feet, that's all about feelings, isn't it? But you can also see beyond the window the raindrops, so that's visual. The wedding ring might be visual as well, or maybe it's itching on his finger. Maybe he's thinking of taking it off, or should he leave it on? And then you go into the emotions. Monica, you want to say something?
Yeah, and I think the weather can represent like pathetic fallacy. Yes, so we can narrate the emotion.
That's a lovely idea. Yes. Just explain pathetic fallacy.
So the weather represents his mood and his emotion and general atmosphere of the scene. Yeah. I'm not sure.
No, you said that very well. So yes, pathetic fallacy is one of those language techniques. It's probably one of the more exotic ones, but you often get this in storytelling, in fiction. And basically, the writer will talk about the weather, maybe a stormy night outside Frankenstein's castle. Well, it's stormy, and that might just be factually what it is. It's just true that it was a stormy night, but the mood of the characters is reflected in the fact it was stormy. This dangerous feeling, this atmosphere that's created by the weather, is actually, the writer is really reflecting the feelings of the narrator or the feelings of the hero. And that's called pathetic fallacy. He's not really describing the weather. He's actually trying to set up an emotional connection with the characters. He's trying to create an effect inside the reader's mind. So yes, talking about the weather, the rain, it's sadness. You can even, if it is this thing about him leaving his life behind, it's the tears in his eyes and the raindrops on the window reflecting the tears in his eyes. You can get all sorts of, it's almost poetry. It just gives you an excuse to write a few lines on each of those points. They do come from the photograph, and it just kickstarts you into writing, just fleshing these ideas out into 4 or 5 lines for each of your 4 paragraphs. So this room's messy, and I can just say the room was messy. But actually, we don't just want to give people a feeling. We don't want to say it's messy. We want to make the reader feel the messiness, don't we? You go inside this room, and what are you actually going to start describing in order to create a feeling of how messy it was? Blessing?
I was gonna give an example and say something along the lines of the innumerable items formed around my feet.
Yeah, and that's a great word, innumerable, because you're actually trying to describe something by saying what it isn't. There's so much of it you can't even begin to count it. So it's a nice word. It just gives the reader an imaginary feeling of just masses of stuff. Yeah, good. And that's what you want to do. You need to, and again, around my feet. So it is a story about you walking into the room. Yeah, I know it's not much of a story, but it's, you are involved as a protagonist. You are there. And so it's, what do I see around my feet? What do I, and the other senses that you can bring to life. What other senses do you think would be important in describing this room? Monica?
We can write first what we see, that we see chaos and it's lots of colors mixed together. We can write about the smell, because maybe it's a messy, dusty, suffocating.
Definitely.
And we can write about the sounds when we walk through the room, because we probably step on the
Very
objects.
good. Yeah.
So, and
I like the sound, because you might be thinking purely what's in the picture. And yes, what we can see, and then imagining what it would smell like if there's old, sort of plates of half-eaten food rotting away in there somewhere. I don't know. But what you said, the sound, because now as you start to move through the room, your feet are actually sloshing through all this stuff, and that will make a noise. Sorry, other people came up and then disappeared. Sorry, who else wants to say something? I saw hands coming up.
Yes, it's me, Sumaya.
Hello, come on.
Hello. I want to talk about smell. That's and the smell of the dust, because that's the room doesn't look is messy, and the clothes everywhere. That's the clothes mix between not clean clothes. It's dirty clothes.
Dirty clothes smell. Yeah.
Smell and the dust.
Yeah. And those are very particular
well.
smells. Those are very particular smells, and they have meaning.
And in terms of description, there are varieties of colors.
Colors, yeah. The red of the bedspread, the whiteness of the unwashed shirts, the grayness of the jacket, the whatever color the carpet is. You can hardly see the carpet,
Yeah.
But yes, color, the effect of it, and of course trying to find maybe metaphors and images that you can use to describe that. Monica?
And we can describe as well the touch, that some objects are soft, some are hard, the texture of some objects. So
yeah,
I think you have lots of to write about it, even if it doesn't look nice.
Yeah, in fact, it probably gives you more to write about because it's such a horror than if you were writing about a nice, neat, tidy room. But even so, you can find things to write about in a neat, tidy room. But yes, you're right. Touch here. If you actually want to touch anything, just the feeling of walking through it, as well as the sound of walking through it, you are feeling it brushing against you, and so on. I mean, God help if something moves in there.
I feel like this must be a robbery happened here. The robber.
Oh yes, like
they're throwing everything away.
I remember when I was a student many years ago. I was having a long lie-in, and I heard shouting down the stairs, and I ran down the stairs, and the landlord was standing there, and he was saying, "Graham, you've been robbed." And he was like looking at all the mess in the front room of our student house, and I said, "Oh no, we haven't. It always looks like this." But I just think teenagers' room. That's all I think.
I think we can use lots of similes or metaphors comparing it to the power of nature, like hurricane, like tornadoes.
Hurricanes, yeah. There's so much.
Boxes as well about that.
Yeah, boxes and things. In fact, you could write more and more and more. So the more you think about
feeling that this person looks that is not cleaning, it doesn't care, depressed, maybe that's the end.
Yeah. Now we're taking the point of view of somebody walking in and seeing it. What if you imagine living in it? So you're allowed to imagine. I'm a character and I live in this room, and then you take it into a completely different perspective. Then, don't you? Yes, like you said, that they might be feeling this represents the chaos and the unhappiness in their life, and you make it instead of almost a comic thing about a teenager's bedroom, we can make it a really depressing and dark thing about somebody who's unhappy or depressed. And of course, it goes a lot further than just saying the room was very messy. I would try. I mean, this was my little attempt at it. I did it very quickly, but the room looked as if a monster had ripped its guts out. Clothes, newspapers, discarded food flooded across every surface. The dull, stomach-curdling stench of unwashed underwear crept up to bite at your ankles. So yeah, I'm just bringing things to life with metaphor and with imagery. Like a monster had ripped its guts out. So like it's an animal that's been torn apart. But then just listing is really, really effective. So you've got lots of stuff: clothes, newspapers, discarded food, just a list. But then the word flooded is a water image, like it's a flood of rubbish that's come through, drowning the room. And finally, the smell of unwashed underwear, but not just saying smell, dull, stomach curdling stench, really going over the top to make it a bit funny, I suppose. And you imagine that the stench, the smell is so vivid, it's like an animal, like a rat coming to bite your ankles. Not pleasant images, but maybe makes people laugh a little bit. But yes, you can take it serious, you can take it humorous, you can be poetic, you can be tragic with your descriptions. I want to now very quickly change to question 5 on paper 2. How is the paper 2 question different? Well, for one thing, it's dealing with non-fiction. So the ideas that you're writing about are meant to be real life, true, not fictional. You're meant to be writing persuasively or argumentatively. It's about your opinions about things. It will always be linked, whatever you're asked to write about will always be linked to the theme of the source documents in part A. So if part A is about extreme sports, the question 5 will be about extreme sports in some way. If it's about the weather, like thunderstorms and so on, then it will be about extreme weather in question 5. That's so you can actually go back, and if you have really no ideas about that subject at all, you can look at the documents you've been answering questions on and use bits from them. They do that deliberately, so you've got some things you can draw on. It will always be based on a statement, a quote that's used to suggest ideas. And you will always have to write in a particular form. So this is an example. There's your statement in the inverted commas, in speech marks. Homework has no value. Some students get it done for them. Some don't do it at all. Students should be relaxing in their free time. So this is just a statement of opinion from who knows. But that's there for you. Just like the photograph on paper 1. That is there to inspire you. Okay? That's your starting point. Then you have the instructions. In this case, write an article for a broadsheet newspaper in which you explain your point of view. It's not an argument. It's not a balanced account. It's just your points of view about homework, perhaps, and its value. Okay. 24 marks out of 40 are for the content, what you have written and the way you have written it, and how you've organized it on the page into paragraphs. 60 marks are for technical accuracy, which is spelling, punctuation, vocabulary, and grammar. Okay, but most of the marks are for the content. So let your mind go free. Really go there and explore these ideas. Do's and don'ts on question 5, paper 2. You should read the statement carefully so you understand it. Think about what the statement is saying. Break it into its parts. It'll always have 3 or 4 parts. And of course, 3 or 4 should be suggesting to you that that could relate to 3 or 4 paragraphs. Decide whether you agree or disagree generally. Now, that one said homework has no value. It's very anti-homework, isn't it? But you don't have to agree with it. You could write about how important homework is. You can be completely opposite. Use the statement to plan your writing, which I will show you how to do in a second. Monica?
I have one question. If we have something like that and we have to write article, can we start from paraphrasing with rhetorical question, for example, the statement, so that we found something like this and we asking question if it's really true or not, and something like that, or not really?
Okay, yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, using rhetorical questions, really powerful way to start, or even just to punctuate your piece of writing all the way through, just having a series of them and then more or less answering the questions. It's a very good way of doing it. But what I want to say is you don't stick too rigidly to the statement. You don't need to stick very rigidly to it. You don't need to really address it at all. Just like the photograph, you can do what you darn well like with it. You know, I would say if you've stuck for ideas, use the statement to create your answer. But if you've got ideas about the subject, just go with it. But never refer to the statement. Don't say, I don't agree with it, the statement when it says this, this, or this, because you're not writing that sort of essay. You're being asked to write an article or a letter or a speech. You're not being asked to address this statement. So never refer to it. Never say this. I don't agree when the statement said that. What statement? You're writing an article for a newspaper. The readers of your newspaper haven't seen the statement. You're just writing on the subject. But yes, use the statement as much as you want to. Homework has no value. So you could, like you said, does homework have no value? Yeah.
Exactly what I wanted to say.
Yeah, exactly. You can use it that way. You can use those words, those statements to plan and indeed the content of what you're writing. But never refer to it as a statement. The statement is only a suggestion. Just like the photo on paper 1, you can do anything that your imagination wants you to do with it. It's meant to be a basis, not a straitjacket. Okay. So you've got 2 parts to looking at the question: the statement itself and the task. So the statement itself breaks down into statements. Homework has no value. Students get it done for them. Some don't do it at all. Students should be relaxing in their free time. 1, 2, 3 parts. 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, if you like, along with an introduction. And the conclusion would make 5. Then you have the task. In this case, it is write an article for a newspaper. And you're aware of, how newspapers like to lay out their articles. This would be an opinion article. That's why they've said broadsheet newspaper. They have the opinions of their columnists, people who write a column, and they basically do articles based on an idea that's occurred to them or a point of view that they have on something that's emerged in the news. So you're just writing your opinions. It's meant to be entertaining, isn't it? Why else would anybody read it? Hold that thought. So the statement is there, and the task is the form of writing. Now, what other forms of writing? We said article. What else can you be asked to write?
Persuasive speech or something like that?
Letter or speech.
Letters, speech.
Yeah, speech, essay, blog. Leaflet.
A leaflet. I mean, you'd be lucky because of the briefness of the leaflet. But yes, some sort of information, definitely. A report, perhaps. The most common ones tend to be, there tends to be reflective writing on your own opinions, regardless of what the actual format is. So the difference between a speech and a letter to the editor, what's the difference? One of them is meant to be said aloud and the other is meant to be read. But other than that, they can say exactly the same things. So can an article in the newspaper. It's basically your voice speaking to the reader. So when I ask, is the form of writing important to the examiners? It's a trick question. No, it really isn't. The examiners are much more interested in what you write. They're more interested in the way you use language and how it grabs the reader, how it energizes them, how it explains the themes. They're not as important as you might think about, does this look like an article? Does this sound like a letter? They really aren't that interested in it. It's more, here's the text and we want to see you creatively explore this particular idea. And you could really do that in almost any format. So worry about what you're writing rather than, do I have to write the address at the top if it's a letter? The answer is no. Don't bother to make it look like a letter. Go straight into the text. Okay. So if it's an opinion piece of writing, whether it's a speech, an article, or anything else, why do people read them? They read them to engage with somebody's ideas. They read them to be amused. They read them to be challenged. They might read them to get ideas for conversations that they're going to have with other people. Oh, I read this thing in the paper the other day, and you never know what they said. They read them as a pastime, just to pass their time. So it mustn't be boring. Regardless of what type of writing and what the subject is, you must not be boring. You must be interesting and exciting if possible. So even when writing non-fiction, the examiners want you to be creative, amusing, maybe shocking. They want you to be original. They want you to be wonderful. All in 5 paragraphs, within 25 minutes on a Thursday morning in June. No tall order. But just think about the old adages about entertaining people, giving them the old razzle dazzle. It's not about effectively reproducing these non-fiction ideas. It's about entertaining the reader. And that's about being descriptive, being creative, using language in interesting ways. One way you can do that is to open with a bang. The opening line is the one everybody's going to remember. And if the opening line isn't good, maybe the reader won't read your piece of writing at all. Maybe they'll just turn the page. Why should they listen to you? Oh, but that's an exciting thing to say. Open with a bang. Here's some examples of opening lines from books. It was a bright, cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. Why is this a different type of opening line? What is different about it? What's difficult about it? What stops this being a boring opening line?
The clock striking 13. We don't have
exactly
13,
yeah. It would be a very strange clock if it struck 13. Imagine if it was like a church steeple with a bell tower and it's striking 13. What's happened to the world? What's happened to Britain if the clocks are striking 13? We're not in the present day. We're not in the normal world, are we? And so it opens up ideas in the reader's mind. Things aren't quite what they seem here. Something strange. It's very subtle and it creeps up on you. Oh, it's a bright, cold day in April. That would be an ordinary way. The clocks were striking 12. It would be a really boring, ordinary sentence. But the fact it's striking 13 just gives a little clue that things are going to be a bit different in this story. That was from George Orwell's 1984. Here's another one. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. What? Oh my God. So, yes, ordinary bloke's name, just waking up. He's an insect. What is going on? Yeah. a shocking opening. And right, I'm going to read on because I want to find out, is he really an insect or is this a metaphor? Is he really an insect? Is he going to ever change back into a person? What's going to happen? That was from Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis.
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And here's one from an old English novel. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. This is an interesting one because this is an opinion. Yeah, it's the opinion of the narrator of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. So the narrator is telling us we don't have to agree with her, but this is her point of view. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune, that's money, must be in want of a wife. Does that follow? Or is this a definition of what a man is and wants? Or is this more a point of view that a person who's interested in getting married has? Yes. Single, got money, he needs a wife. It's more of a mission statement for a young lady who needs, yeah. So there's a bit of fun being had with that. But that's not non-fiction, that's fiction. So we go back. Here is non-fiction. And this is a weird one. This is a journalist who was given a commission to go and cover a motorcycle race in Las Vegas in the late 1960s. And so he got a friend and a car, and he got as much alcohol and drugs as possible. And then they got blasted. Hey, they gave him money. They trusted him. See what happened there? And then he wrote a book about it. So this is non-fiction, but non-fiction as we don't really tend to understand it. And this is the opening line, or line or two, from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. We were somewhere around Barstow at the edge of the desert when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe you should drive. And suddenly there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and diving around the car, which was going about 100 miles an hour with a top down to Las Vegas. And the voice was screaming, Holy Jesus, what are these goddamn animals? Well, that's non-fiction, right? That's the way to start an article about going to Las Vegas to cover a motorcycle race. I don't suggest you do write anything like that in an exam, but it's just an example of where you can go with non-fiction. There are no rules, just like there are no rules with fiction. You can be as creative and mad as you like, and sometimes starting with something incredibly in your face is the best way to get the reader hooked. So I give you the statement plan. In order to do this, you need to first look at the statement and find the three most important points in the statement. You can usually break the statement into three parts. Decide whether you agree or disagree with each part. And then you will have to do an introduction. That's one of the main things you do have to do. You have to introduce the reader to your story. That doesn't have to be a formal introduction, as you can see from the example that I gave you there. It's just get your reader into what you're talking about. Here we are, we're going to be talking about madness and drugs. Well, one way of doing that is to just get you into some sort of crazy nightmare. Okay. If you're going to be talking about homework, maybe you will want to start a little bit more, but you can always start with homework is the worst thing in the world. Or if you want to use a rhetorical question, isn't homework the worst thing in the world? Why do we damage our kids with homework? That sort of thing. Get the reader going, what? So you have an introduction. That's your first paragraph. And then you will have 2 or 3 paragraphs, each either agreeing or disagreeing with one of the points from the statement. And then you add a conclusion that brings it all together. Try and include a big idea in your piece of writing. One big idea that goes all the way through. So what are these key thoughts? So homework is worthless. It has no value. You can agree, you can disagree. Kids should be enjoying life instead. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. Parents help too much. Maybe this is because there's too much homework. Some kids do it, others don't. It should be enforced. Those are just some of the ideas. You could write a paragraph that says that. The big idea is the overarching message in your writing. Now, that's different from fiction, which doesn't tend to have an obvious message. But when you're writing non-fiction, if you're writing travel fiction, it's about why did I go here and what did I experience? If you're writing an argument about homework is good or bad, you need to have a point of view. So what is it that you're trying to say in your piece of writing? Big ideas add to the structure. You can introduce them at the beginning and then sell them in the conclusion. You can mention the big idea in each of your paragraphs. You don't have to believe in the big idea. And if you can't think of one, just take it from the statement. Remember it said homework has no value? That is a big idea. Most people would disagree with that. No value at all. I'm not going to disagree with it as a teacher for some 30 odd years. I'm not going to say that homework has no value. I think it's absolutely valuable. But it is a statement of opinion. So that itself is a big idea. But you could change it. You can take that straight. Homework has no value, and you're just going to show examples of why it isn't. That's a revolutionary idea. On the other hand, you can turn it around. Homework is vital. You know, a conservative reversal. You can be just as forceful and passionate about that as the person who said this is about it having no value. They're both exaggerated points. You know, homework isn't the be and all and end all of education, and it isn't true that it has no value. It may not have as much value as school teachers think. What about taking a quirky take? Homework's okay. It's school that's the problem. You know, let's just have homework. Let's have people working at home on homework. Let's abolish school. You can be quite funny on that. Or you could go completely revolutionary. Teacher, leave those kids alone. You know, a complete rejection of learning, a kind of a radical Marxist 1970s view of schools. It's all about dominating the kids and forcing them into work. You know, it could be an exaggerated point of view. And you remember, you don't have to believe in your big idea, but you could play it for satirical humor. You could actually have that as your big idea because you want to show how bad that idea is, but try and have an idea in there as well. So my suggestion plan is open with a bang, paragraph 1, introduction. Open with a bang, introduce your big idea. Paragraph 2, explain your first key point, which could come from one of the points in the suggestion, and link that to the big idea. Paragraph 3, explain key point 2 and link to the big idea. Paragraph 4 is optional, but you could do a third key point, but you must have a conclusion. So you must have an introduction and a conclusion because it gives it shape. And that shape is specific to the idea of a non-fiction piece of writing. So an article will introduce and it will conclude. It won't just drift away. So at the end, refer to your key points, refer to the arguments you've made, and show how much you have sold and established your big idea. Again, it's only 4 or 5 paragraphs. But it makes sense, it has cohesion, and if you want to, you can just take it from that statement. My big idea is that homework has no value. Homework is worthless. It's damaging to children. Paragraph 1, look, even when homework is set, some people don't even do it. They get their parents to do it. It's rubbish, you know. That's terrible. That's really irresponsible. It completely takes all the worth away from it. That's why homework has no value. Young people should be out relaxing, having fun with their lives, you know, and so on, learning from life. And that's why homework has no value. And so I've showed you that homework has no value because. So if you have no ideas, just take it straight from there. Homework's a waste of time. Let's ban it. Let's ban homework, kids. Point one, some kids cheat, get their parents to do it. What's the point of it? Some kids do it, others don't. It isn't enforced. It isn't fair. Kids should be enjoying their youth. You learn more from play and discovery, so it's worthless. Conclusion, it's a waste of time. It isn't fair. It gets in the way of natural learning through play and discovery. Let's ban homework for good. And that's my big idea. Bum, bum, bum. And you can do that with any statement they give you. Even if you don't understand the themes, even if it's a new subject to you. And whilst you're doing it, you know, try and use some rich description as well. There's not many things you have to do on this one, is there? I'm sorry about that. So you open with a bang and introduce your big idea. So let's have the introduction. Snow is great. I love snow. Yeah, that's my big idea. So it's picturesque. It's beautiful. And there's where you can bring in some description of the beauty of snow. It's exciting. You know, so I can actually have some action description about snowboard and skiing, you know, show how exciting it is. It's fun because of snowball fighting and the joy that that can bring to kids. So you can get into the rich description. Yes, not all of the writing can be description because you're trying to get across ideas, but you can liven it up by making the reader feel these things that you're trying to explain. And actually, you're going to win the argument, not because you've explained it, but because you've put them on your side. You've made them feel it's true. And then finally, see, I told you snow is great because it's exciting and it's okay. That's us finished. Anybody got any last questions? I will unshare so we can see your faces. No, I can't see any faces at all. Okay. Anybody got anything they want to say or questions before I close down?
Where can we find this the recording?
This recording, right? At the moment, it's a bit hit and miss. What I'm going to do is I'll make a segment on your Moodle page for your class, and in that segment, I will put each of the films as we do them. And I'll also put other bits and pieces up there as well. But there's nothing there yet. Bear with me into early next week. Okay.
Okay. So the sessions are going to be regularly from this point. I understand.
Yes. So you should have had 2 emails from me which show the plan of attack, but I will send it out again because it looks like some people missed it. So each week now, I'm not doing it the week of your first exam. So the week before your exam, your paper 1, I'll do a paper 1 revision. Then the week after your exam, I'll do a paper 2 revision. Okay, and that'll be the last one, which will be in the half term between the 2 exams.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm switching off. I've switched off the recording. You're very welcome.